Do you have a FoxFlow X2 rear shock? If so, this video is gonna teach you how to set it up correctly. My name's Jeff Kendall-Weed. I'm a professional mountain biker, and this video is brought to you by Jensen USA. Today we're gonna go through the FoxFlow X2, which has a total of 6 adjustments to set up. I really like this shock. I did the review video you can see right here, and the #1 question I got was, how do I set this thing up? As well as, Jeff, what settings do you like to use? So first, let's go through how you can set your shock up, and then I'll tell you how I've set up my own shock. Let's get into it. The most important part of setting up your rear shock is gonna be setting your sag correctly. Check your owner's manual, figure out what the stroke is of the shock you're working with. In this case, I'm using an Ibis HD4 that has a FoxFlow X2 with a 2¼ inch or 57mm long stroke. And I wanna set it up with 25% sag. So I wanna get about 14mm of sag. That means when I've sat on this bike, the shock is compressed in 14mm. This rubber O-ring right here is gonna be slid 14mm from the base of the shock. In order to do this, let's change into riding gear and sit on the bike. All right, got my riding gear on, let's hop on the bike and let's make sure I got the correct amount of sag. Step #1, hop on the bike. You wanna break the stiction free by jiggling the bike a little bit. Make sure the bike's properly settled. Slide the O-ring down to the shock body so that it denotes how far into the travel the bike sits when you're just stationary. Carefully hop off the bike. All right, let's see if we're ready to go. Now that we've got our sag set up, we gotta start getting into the damping adjustments as per that amount of air pressure you've got in the spring. On the X2, there's a blue and a red dial on the end. The blue is for the compression, the red is for the rebound. Fox has this nifty little tool that has a 3mm Allen on one end and a 6mm Allen on the other. So the 3mm will adjust the low speed adjustments and the 6mm will adjust the high speed. First, pay attention to the low speed rebound, low speed compression. Setting up the low speed rebound is relatively easy. You're gonna use your 3mm Allen key in the red adjuster in the center there. Set it up so that you can ride straight down a curb and you don't get bucked off the saddle, and so that your suspension is returning back to the sagged in point fairly quickly. If it's so slow you can watch it come back up real slowly, that's too slow. If it's so fast the rear tire leaves the ground or your butt comes off the seat when you go down that curb, it's too fast. Once you have a baseline on the low speed rebound, let's try and get into the low speed compression. A lot of this is done through feel, which is why I think it's really important to set up a circuit that you can ride multiple times in a row. For instance, I would find something that hopefully has at least 20 seconds of descending and that's easily able to be repeated. So it's got like a climbing trail nearby, or you simply don't mind hiking back up it to ride back down again. You might notice that without much low speed, your suspension can start to bob. You add some low speed compression, it gets rid of that bobbing. Now, too much low speed creates a harshness. It means that the rear wheel does not actually give when you go over bumps, it skips over them. So you've got to find the middle ground between all this so you have good resistance when you're pushing into the bike, and that when you pedal, you're not losing efficiency. Once you've established a good baseline for your low speed adjustments, your low speed rebound, your low speed compression, take the bike onto the trails, start riding your repeatable circuit, your short descent with an easy climb back up, and prepare to do this maybe 10 or 15 times. Now every lap, your skills will improve and you'll become more familiar with the track, but that's good. You're gonna get to really be familiar with how your bike reacts to all those conditions, and you'll also start to internalize what all those adjustments actually do. Too much damping, you end up with harshness, your tire ends up skidding too easily, you wash out in corners. Too little damping, and once again, you'll wash out in corners, your bike will skid very easily, and it'll bob back and forth as you try and pedal. So you gotta find the middle ground of all of these. As you start to get into the high speed adjustments, the high speed compression is usually the first thing I start to adjust once the low speed's all set. And the high speed compression is great at resisting bottom out. It's really good at resisting big hits. My test tracks usually include some kind of a jump, and it usually has an opportunity to land a tad flat, something like that. So I get a good idea of how much resistance I need to keep from bottoming out with the bigger hits. I'll adjust the high speed compression in basically 4 turn increments. And if I do 4 and it's too much, then I can back out 2 turns. You end up with too much high speed rebound and your rear tire is gonna feel a little too stuck to the ground, kind of hard to bunny hop, It might have some weird characteristics where it packs down on faster successive hits in a row. That's why you really need a repeatable test track to start to notice that stuff. So the low speed rebound will probably be more noticeable 95% of the ride. That high speed rebound is very important when you say you land sideways and you compress your spring really quickly, a lot of kinetic energy, and it's gonna explode back out, but you've got that high speed rebound there to keep you from getting ejected off your bike or kicked in the wrong direction. So it's a great safety net. That said, I do a similar strategy with making a big adjustment and seeing if that's in the right direction or the wrong, and then splitting the difference down to a tighter adjustment. Then we gotta start thinking about the air spring volume adjustments. Adjusting your air spring is really cool. You can make your shock way more progressive by adding just a couple of these air spring volume reducers. The can slides off, these things come in pairs, they snap right on, and they make a very noticeable change in how progressive the shock compresses. If I'm doing a lot of big jumps landing on flat, then I will definitely add the maximum number of air volume reducers that I can. It makes a very noticeable feel. If I've got flatter, more mellower terrain I'll be riding for a while, then I'll remove some so that I can use all my travel and get every last little millimeter of traction that's available. I weigh 160 pounds, I'm riding Ibis HD4, and in my X2 rear shock, I have 180 PSI. I'm running 2 volume reducers in there. I like a bike that's fairly playful, but also surprisingly glued to the ground. This means that I got plenty of traction in corners, but it's not super hard to get off the ground for jumps. So running into the settings, my low speed compression, crank it all the way in, then I back it out 20 turns. That's not much low speed compression. The low speed rebound, tighten it all the way in, back it out 19 turns. This keeps the bike fairly poppy and playful. I'm running quite a bit more high speed damping than low speed. I like this because it provides a lot of control when impacts get bigger than things that I can really take care of myself. If you have any questions on how to set up your X2, definitely give the guys at Jensen USA a phone call. I've got a link below that goes straight to the Foxflow X2 page over at Jensen. If you're thinking about a new shock, the guys at Jensen are great to talk to you about that. They've got a great variety of bikes that they've ridden. They can compare for you in terms of which shocks work best on which bikes. And if you like this video, click that subscribe button below.